It is now time for the Robesonian Sports Report with Chris Styles on 97.1 FM, 1340 AM, WAGR in Lumberton, covering sports for Robeson County. Now here's your host, Chris Styles.
Welcome to the Robesonian Sports Report here on WAGR. I'm Chris Styles, sports editor at the Robesonian, and 30 minutes here, just a chance to briefly recap the previous week, week 3 in high school football, look ahead to week 4, and going to talk a little bit of UNCP as well. Looking at week 3, Purnell Sweat with a 33-13 win over Red Springs. The Rams improved to 3-0 on the season. South Brunswick beat St. Paul's 26-21. Westover beat Fairmont 34-8, and Clinton beat Lumberton 41-6. And then UNCP with of course the weeks are a little bit different. It's week 1 in college, but a 19-17 win over Fayetteville State. So jumping right in, Purnell Sweat, Red Springs. I mentioned 33-13 win for the Rams. It's their first 3-0 start since 2017, and they're going into a bye week with all that momentum before conference play starts. Their physicality really is what won them the game. They kind of wore down Red Springs over the course of 48 minutes. And depth was a factor in that too. The larger school and the larger team, proved to be a factor. And that resulted in a stronger second half performance for Purnell Sweat than what they had done in the first half. They scored right before halftime, I believe, if memory serves me correctly, to make it a 2-score game, and then kind of opened it up some more from there. And it was a well-rounded rushing attack for Purnell Sweat with some new faces making a difference. J.C. Locklear had a long touchdown run and had close to 100 yards for them. That's not a name we really had seen up to this point, at least making a big splash like that. And then Raymond Cummings threw the ball some more than he has for them, for Purnell Sweat. Had a long touchdown pass for the game's first score as well. So a very good night offensively for them. Defensively, it was really 2 big plays, and other than that, really shut Red Springs down pretty well, contained the running game really well, which is what Red Springs had been doing well the first couple of weeks. T.J. Ellerby had those 2 big plays, a couple of long touchdown catches. He's really, really good athlete for them that I think once they get to playing 2A schools in conference play is going to really have a good season, and is already having a good season. Even as they've been playing a lot of bigger competition. But and to that end, the last couple of weeks set up Red Springs going into Lumberton this week, Mullins next week, and then conference play after that. They've played games against teams that they have the depth disadvantage as a smaller school. And Lumberton, of course, is a larger school, but is a struggling program. So and then Mullins will be more on the Red Springs level, and obviously their conference games coming up. So that should set up Red Springs well moving forward. And I mentioned Purnell Sweat going into the bye week. We hear this momentum, 3-0, and it's a 4-game winning streak dating back to the Lumberton game to finish out last season. South Brunswick over St. Paul's, 26-21. And it's a 0-3 start for St. Paul's. That hasn't happened since 2015. They've, of course, been the best program in the county the last few years. And a 5-game losing streak for them for the first time since late 16 into early 17. Similarly, this 5-game streak, the last 2 games of last season into the first 3 of this season. This one at South Brunswick was a back-and-forth game. South Brunswick scored with a little over 5 minutes left on a quarterback keeper, and that gave them the lead and ultimately made the difference. Just a case of growing pains for a young St. Paul's team going through it against a tough schedule. Because of that success they've had the last few years, they're an attractive team to play for other programs kind of in that same position, and as a result, they've played some tough teams, particularly Westover, Lee County. South Brunswick maybe not quite as much on that level, but still a team that's 2-1, so we'll see what becomes of South Brunswick season and how that game looks in the long run. But nonetheless, St. Paul's playing that tough schedule, and that'll continue with West Columbus this week, and we'll talk about that a little later on. But So as I said, going through some growing pains for them. Joshua McBride, who's a young running back for them, kind of the heir apparent in the program after Canarian Baldwin graduated. He did have all 3 touchdowns in that game, a couple rushing touchdowns as well as a receiving touchdown. So that's certainly a bright spot for St. Paul's. You're listening to the Robesonian Sports Report here on WAGR. I'm your host, Chris Stiles, sports editor at the Robesonian, and we're going over Week 3 high school football games from last Friday. And Westover and Fairmont met in Fairmont. That was a tied game at halftime before Westover pulled away for a 34-8 win. That probably surprised a lot of people that it was tied at halftime. And really it was, granted, Fairmont struggled offensively. They actually haven't scored an offensive touchdown in a couple of weeks. They had a defensive score in this one. But the defense was right there all game. The touchdowns, the last 3 touchdowns Westover scored in that game were a block punt and 2 punt returns. So special teams were obviously a huge factor in this game. And kind of reminds me of a couple years ago for Fairmont. They had a couple similar games to this where defensively and even offensively maybe we were right there, and it was special teams or perhaps a couple fringe plays, if you will, that made difference in some games back then, and that's kind of returned here for the Golden Tornadoes. And that was 2 years ago. That was a first-year coach with Lonnie Cox. Now it's a first-year coach with Jeremy Carthen. So there's some striking similarities there. But the good news is the defense is playing very well for Fairmont. So if they can get some of the other kinks worked out, that could certainly be that defensive strength could certainly be something that really helps them moving forward. And then the other game in Robeson County Friday night was Clinton with a 41-6 win at Lumberton. And in my predictions column, I believe I said 56-7 for this game. So it was, even though it was a blowout, it was a little closer than maybe some expected. It was 7-0 after a quarter, so it wasn't Clinton, coming out and throttling the Pirates right out of the gate. It took a little time for them to pull away. So, perhaps that could. This is Clinton a 2A state championship contender, Lumberton a struggling program, so. That might bode well. It's kind of a weird way to think about it, but that might bode well for Lumberton a little bit as they move into playing teams that aren't state championship contenders moving forward. And Red Springs, who is 1-2, coming to Lumberton this week. A little bit more of a matchup where it could be a little bit more even this week. Of note in that game, Clinton's Josiah Robinson had 5 rushing touchdowns. Just an excellent performance for him in that one. And somebody that is going to have a great season, obviously, for the Dark Horses as they're pulling out everything in their path right now. And they're going to be playing deep into the fall and even winter to a degree as they pursue a 2A state championship, which they are more than capable of winning. We'll have to see how that goes for them come playoff time. And then at the college ranks locally, UNCP with a 19-17 win over Fayetteville State. I said in the paper the Two Rivers Classic lived up to the classic billing, certainly. This game, UNCP had kicked a field goal to go up 16-10 with 4 minutes and change on the clock. Barry Elliott ran back the kickoff for Fayetteville State to take the lead. So it looked like the Broncos might come out of there with the win. And then UNCP actually punted it back with a couple minutes left, got a stop, got it back, and then drove down the field. Probably their best offensive drive of the game, really, was right there at the end. And Ty Woods kicked a field goal with 9 seconds left to get the win. That in his first collegiate game, Ty Woods, he was 4 for 4 with field goals and was the Mountain East Conference Special Teams Player of the Week. Strong night defensively, and as I said, kind of an up and down night offensively, but when they needed to, they really put a good drive together there in the late going. They'll be looking to improve the run game moving forward. The passing game had a pretty good night. And of course, you can read about all this on Robesonian.com. Your home for all things Robeson County local sports. Previews for the upcoming week of high school football, which of course we'll talk about here later in the show. And then recaps from last week, UNCP and high school as well. We're just getting started here on the Robesonian Sports Report. Tim Ray, the head coach at Red Springs football team, will be joining us after the break on the Robesonian Sports Report. Back on the Robesonian Sports Report here on WAGR, and we're joined on the phone by Red Springs head football coach Tim Ray as the Red Devils coming off the game against Purnell Sweat and preparing for Lumberton this week. How's it going, Coach?
It's going good, man. How's everything with you?
Pretty good. You guys 1-2 so far this season. How would you assess the team's results so far?
The record doesn't show the progress. The record doesn't show what we got going on. We definitely could play better, but I don't think we're in a bad spot going into week 4. I think we're in a decent spot, and we got some very winnable ball games coming up. So we just got to do our jobs and be efficient.
Yeah, mentioning that improvement, how would you compare the program to where it was this time last year going into week 4?
Just the small things, turnovers, penalties, just silly mistakes, stuff like that we used to make. We're just getting better week by week. Even compared to the scrimmages in week 1, we don't have as many silly penalties. We don't have as many false starts. Stuff like that is what I'm looking at. All in all, we got to make sure we're taking care of business, offense, defense, and special teams. But I think mentally and culture-wise, we're in a better spot than we were this time last year.
And Purnell Sweat game, their physicality kind of made a difference there, and obviously their depth did too. But looking ahead to conference play, the depth factor kind of goes away when you're playing schools your own size. But how can you guys look to be more physical? Because there's going to be some physical teams in St. Paul's and Clinton and so on in conference play.
Not really looking ahead. Biggest thing is we want to just make sure we're preparing ourselves. We really try to hone in to the weight room and our conditioning this summer, this off season. So we really wanted to make sure we prepared ourselves to play, these 4A schools. Like you said, depth is a big difference. I think right there late in the second half, it showed that, our guys were just a little bit more worn down than theirs because, we have some guys going both ways. In the 2A program, it's hard to find any 2A program that don't have guys going both ways. At least that's going to reduce for you. So we just trying to make the best out of what we can do and keep working.
Yeah, coming out of the back end of the Grace Creek and the Purnell Sweat games, how can those help you moving forward?
Both teams are really good. I think they're very improved programs. Grace Creek did pretty good last year. I think Purnell Sweat, returning a lot of kids. Even though they have a new coach, he's a familiar face, very familiar voice to those kids. So there's not like they're hearing something new that they haven't been hearing from him. It shows. It shows that they've done well this off season with both teams, and I think systematically that they're really good at what they do. And biggest thing is we want to play teams like that that's physical up front, that runs the ball well, because in 2-way football, that's what a lot of teams in the playoffs, a lot of teams in our conference do well. They want to run the ball well, so we have to learn and see some different systems of teams who do that well, going into our next phase of the season in conference and so on into the playoffs.
And a bright spot from the Purnell game, certainly for you guys, was T.J. Ellerby with those 2 long touchdown catches. Just an electric athlete for you guys and is capable of seemingly anything once he gets the ball in his hands.
Yeah, Purnell Sweat did a great job of taking our run days away. And, we try to be a team that take advantage of things that they're going to give us. I call it the gifts. I said if somebody's going to give us a gift, we got to take them. So with them putting so many guys in the box to stop our run game with Kelsey, it opens up a lot of one-on-one situations with TJ. And when you get one-on-ones with TJ, you gotta make sure you take advantage of him. Once the ball gets in his hand, he can do the rest. So that was the biggest part, is making sure we, when they give us the gifts, and we continue to take advantage of them and kind of play off of those two guys together.
Yep. And you mentioned Jakelson Mack. He's just as explosive as well. The Purnell game notwithstanding. So, moving forward, how much are you looking for him to kind of have that same type of really big impact on you guys all season long?
It's good. I think he got a lot of pressure mentally last week with a lot of everybody knew what he has been doing. He went into the game the number one rusher in 2A. So, I think he mentally just had a lot of pressure on himself, and I think he overthought the game, thought he had to overdo it. And that was a big message that I had with him this weekend was, he doesn't have to overthink his game. His game is natural. And when he just naturally lets it flow and let it happen, eventually it's going to break. He might have the 2, 3 yard, 5 yard runs here and there, but he just keeps doing what he does naturally. The 25, 30 plus, 50 plus yard runs will come. So that's just a good thing of having these experiences. Especially with both those guys being underclassmen, they can get these experiences and learn from them.
Here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR, and we're talking to Red Springs head football coach Tim Ray, and the Red Devils have Lumberton this week. So what have you seen from the Pirates on film as you guys prepare to face them?
They do a lot. They do a lot of different things offensively and defensively. Like I said, they have very good structure. You can tell that those guys have been really coached up well. They're still improving in some phases of the game, as all of us are. But you definitely can tell that these guys have really took Coach with a better culture system, and they have really bought in with him. And so biggest thing that I see with them, because I haven't played Lumberton, so I can't compare them to the past teams. But just what I see from this year, I see that they're really trying to buy into Coach Van's system and what he does.
Yep. And when you're facing a team that's got a long losing streak like Lumberton does, how do you kind of make sure that your kids don't overlook them, or however you want to frame that, and make sure that they give them the proper respect?
I don't think that they're overlooking them. I honestly think Lumberton is overlooking us, if I must say. Coming into the season, the guys noticed this all season that Lumberton had us as their senior night. It's week 4. That put a little chip on a lot of our guys' shoulder. Because, senior night usually is your last home game of the year. But I believe they said, hey, we play this 2A team, it's a home game. And, we both been struggling the last couple of years on the schedule. I believe they feel like that's a good chance for their seniors to go out and win a home game. So, like I said, a lot of the guys have took mental note of that. We don't really speak on it. We ain't really talking about stuff like that. But I know our guys, they're not overlooking the game at all.
Yep. And surprisingly, the first meeting between Lumberton and Red Springs in football in history, that really surprised me when I realized that. But what do you think this game will mean to the communities when you guys do meet on the gridiron Friday night?
I didn't realize until you had printed it. I knew, at least when my time of growing up and watching, from late 90s all the way to now, I don't remember Lumberton playing Red Springs. I didn't know it was the first ever meeting. And biggest thing that we wanted to do this year was we wanted to play the county schools. We have all county schools on our schedule. Two is in conference. The two biggest schools are non-conference games. And that was intentional. For one, the two 4A schools are going to give us good competition, and it's good morale for Robeson County. Being a Robeson County native, I think that's something that this county needed. We were very in the past couple of years. It's kind of been St. Paul's on one level, and everybody else get in where they fall in. And so I really wanted to make sure that we kind of bring the county together where, every week they got somebody to support in Robeson County. Regardless if all of these schools are owing whatever, I think when you play in the county team, you're going to get support because people take pride in their hometown. So, even with everybody being better this year, I think it's a big thing, But like even with the teams in the past couple of years, as down as a lot of the teams have been, I think something like this is a big for morale in the county.
Yep. And you mentioned Red Springs being your alma mater, so now in your second season, how has the reality of coaching back at where you went to high school kind of matched what your expectations may have been?
It's been a good experience, but very humbling experience as well. Coming from a certain mentality of Red Springs ball when I played here, it's a lot has changed, and change is not always a bad thing. Because even as a player, I think that's what encouraged me to become a coach. Was I wanted to see a lot of the things that I experienced changed, So it's good that I'm able to be here. Mr. Campbell and Coach Madison was able to bring me in here, and they hired me here. I'm very grateful. I just seen that a lot of things that I was doing at Goldsboro culture-wise could be done in my own hometown. My first year at Goldsboro as an offensive coordinator, we took a team that went over the year before, and then we went 6-6, and then the next year I became a head coach, and we went 7-6, and we just kind of kept building year in, year out, all the way up to the COVID years, and I think if COVID never happened, we'd have been even better that COVID year. But like I said, I just seen some cultural things that Goldsboro allowed me to do in my first time being a head coach that I was like, I would love to see in my own hometown. So I was just grateful that the opportunity presented itself. I didn't think I would be here coaching this early. I thought this would be, my last stop later on in my career. And, it might still be my last stop, just might be a little longer tenure here. So.
Yep. And as you guys have shown that improvement here in your second season, what does kind of the long-term future of the program look like in your eyes?
Biggest thing, Red Springs are always going to have talent. All the Robertson County schools are always going to have talent. We're really blessed with athleticism around here. Culture is the biggest thing, and that's what I've been preaching to the guys the last 2 weeks coming out with losses. It's just culture. Even though we lost those two teams, that was really they're good ball teams. You know what I mean? Like, irregardless of anything else, it's just culture. You can see as much changes we tried to make and stuff like that. You can see certain situations bring out the old culture and what these guys have experienced. And every time we see it, we try to address it in real time. And try to remind them, our purpose of why we do things. And, really get them to understand that it's not the same as old, yeah, we might be down a touchdown. Yeah, we may be struggling here. But at the end of the day, we continue to do things with purpose and understand what our culture is and what we're trying to do here at Red Springs, I don't think we'll have any issues. So that's the biggest thing, is just keeping the culture high, keeping the standard high, and making sure these guys don't ever forget it.
Yep. Red Springs football coach Tim Ray, thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
Yep. We'll be right back with the Robesonian Sports Report. Back inside the Robesonian Sports Report, I'm your host, Chris Stiles, sports editor at the Robesonian, and looking ahead to week 4 of high school football here in Robeson County, and the kind of headline matchup, if you will, is Red Springs at Lumberton, and what is, as we just discussed with Coach Ray, the first meeting all time between these two county schools. That's just hard for me to believe, but it is true, and both coaches kind of feel like they're seeing strides in their team the last couple weeks, even as they've been. Red Springs has lost its last couple games against 4A schools, and Lumberton's got a long losing streak coming in. But as both coaches say that, it's kind of time to prove it as they face each other, and somebody's going to win Friday night. And Red Springs, the run game kind of looking to rebound after it had a tough night against Purnell Sweat's defensive front last week. And, of course, T.J. Ellerby, we mentioned, on the outside as a receiver, a big threat for them as well. Lumberton will be looking for some offense. They scored a couple touchdowns against Fairmont and one against Clinton, which, I mean, scoring, let's see, that's 9 points a game so far, is still actually a mild improvement from last year. The year before that, that's how much this team has struggled, but to get in the win column, they're probably going to need to score some more than that even. So, and get, 20, 25, 30 points. Although this really could be a low-scoring game. We'll have to see. But and it's the final tune-up for conference play in the United 8 for Lumberton. They will begin conference play the following week. And Red Springs still has one more non-conference game with Mullins next week before they begin play in the Southeastern. Looking elsewhere around the county, West Columbus is at St. Paul's. These two were conference opponents from 2003 to 2019. St. Paul's won 13 of those 17 games, and they're 16-4 in the series overall. And another tough game for St. Paul's. We talked about the tough schedule, and they're 0-3 in that tough schedule as a young team. And West Columbus is a third-round team from last year in the state playoffs in 1A, and just lost a few seniors from that team. So it should be a very competitive Vikings team. I think one key for St. Paul's in this game and moving forward is just not to get too down on itself with that record. Again, they've played a tough schedule, and there's definitely going to be some opportunities for wins coming up in conference play. Clinton, of course, the heavy favorite in the Southeastern, but second place is pretty much wide open. St. Paul's can continue working on some things through non-conference, and the results will be what they'll be. Maybe it'll be a win against West Columbus, we'll see, but and maybe not. But bigger picture, they could still have a very good run through conference play if they don't get too down on themselves and kind of stay the course here with what they're doing there for the Bulldogs. You're listening to the Robesonian Sports Report here on WAGR. I'm your host, Chris Stiles, and we're talking about Week 4 high school football games locally. Fairmont is at Southern Lee, and last year was the first meeting between the teams. Southern Lee won it 41-22. Southern Lee, not really sure how strong of a team they are. They're 2-1, but both programs they've beaten have been struggling programs. They lost to a strong Eastern Randolph team that's been a deep playoff team in 1A the last couple of years, up from around Ashboro. But Southern Lee's attempted 4 passes all season, so very much a run-heavy team. Tyrese Douglas has rushed for 7 touchdowns, so containing him will be big for Fairmont. And Fairmont's defense, as we mentioned earlier, has played pretty well. The offense has been a struggle. They haven't scored an offensive touchdown the last 2 games. They had a special teams touchdown against Purnell Sweat and a defensive touchdown last week against Westover. So the offense figuring that out, and of course had some special team struggles as well against Westover. So those will be priorities for them moving into this game. Nonetheless, I would consider them mild underdogs in this one at Southern Lee. And Purnell Sweat has a open week this week, a bye week, ahead of next week's conference opener in the United 8 against Grays Creek. So the Rams 3-0, and they'll stay undefeated at least one more week, if not longer, but results will determine that. But obviously, they won't have any result this week on the bye week. UNCP is at West Virginia State. This is a Thursday night game as the Braves look to start 2-0 in their Mountain East Conference opener off the win over Fayetteville State. West Virginia State went to Morehead State, which is a Division I FCS school, in Week 1, and lost a close game, 37-35. So that would appear to bode well for them, really. And Coach Mark Hall from UNCP said, even before the Fayetteville State game, he felt like this game, Week 2, was going to be the most important game of the Braves season because either they would be 1-0, as it turned out they are, and they'd be looking to start 2-0 and doing so in a road game as a program with him as the first-year head coach. But previously, they've really struggled on the road. Or, of course, the alternative was going to be 0-1 and trying to avoid an 0-2 start. So either way, he felt like this was going to be the biggest game of their season. And so going on the road to West Virginia State will be a big one for them and kind of determine what the direction of their season, at least early on, is going to be. But personally, I think they have a pretty good chance to win this one and start 2-0. And you can read a preview of that game and of all of the high school games on Robesonian.com. Predictions column, gamers from last week. That again, as I say every week, they're a few days back, so you might have to search a little bit, but they're there on Robesonian.com. Also, stories on Purnell Sweat soccer off to a strong start, and Lumberton soccer, their first couple of conference games in the United 8 as well. So, as I always say, the Robesonian.com, your destination for local sports coverage, of course, at the Robesonian. So that'll wrap it up for this edition of the Robesonian Sports Report. Thanks to Tim Ray for joining us this week, the Red Springs head football coach, ahead of their game with Lumberton. Paul Matthews flipping the switches here at the station, and I'm Chris Stiles. Thanks for joining us here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR.